the TVWD Budget Committee meeting on the proposed 2021-23 budget to order, and remind everyone to please use your microphone whenever you're speaking and mute yourself when you are finished. So taking things just a little bit out of order, what I'd like to do is see if I have a motion and a second to approve the meetings from the 3 Budget Committee workshops.
This is Todd Sanders. I move to accept the meetings from the 3 budget workshops dated March 23rd, April 8th, and April 22nd, 2021.
This is Jim Duggan. I second that motion.
So Commissioner Sanders has moved and Commissioner Duggan has seconded. Could I have a roll call vote, please, from the district recorder to see if other people are in favor of affirming the meeting minutes?
Commissioner Bagnall?
Yes.
Commissioner Doan, he has arrived. Commissioner Doan, we cannot hear you. Could you say something again? Commissioner Duggan?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. McWilliams?
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Whiteley?
Yes.
Well, I do believe that is a quorum. So we've got the meeting minutes approved, but now we are still awaiting a couple of members to come so that we can elect a budget committee chair. I'm sorry, Debbie, let me ask you again, who all are we waiting for? We do have Commissioner Doan now.
We do, however, he is muted and I don't have the ability to unmute him. And then we're still awaiting Commissioner Schmidt and then Mr. Fisher, Mr. Veleradsky.
Hey, does anybody know any jokes?
We could start with the management presentation. Some of the information we've presented has been presented before, and then we could come back to the election of officers if that would be acceptable.
Sure, that works. If there's something we can do that would not unduly hinder the other commissioners from their duties at this meeting, let's go ahead with it.
Okay. Well, then I will skip ahead here just a few and get to the presentation by management, and then we'll circle back at any time that you tell me to. So please interrupt me as we go along. So first, I do want to open by just thanking the Budget Committee members yet again for your continued assistance in the district as we go through the public process of establishing our biennial budget. It's a very important step, and it's a very important part of our financial management process, and we really appreciate your participation. And it's very important to the district and all of our customers. I present here our agenda, and I know we're taking things a little bit out of order, but we can circle back to the election of officers when it seems appropriate. We have the rest of the members here, but I do want to just cover some questions that we had from the prior workshop, and then we have a presentation from Tom Hickman, our CEO. He's got some comments that he wants to make to set up the budget and to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are. And then I want to present the proposed budget and the budget message, which really is the purpose of this meeting tonight. And then we want to discuss some of the deferred projects with the Willamette Water Supply System to make sure that we've fully described some of the changes that have happened in the Willamette Water Supply Program in the, Mr. Fisher is here, in the recent, over the past few months. And then we'll discuss the proposed budget by fund, which is essentially the purpose of this meeting as well. And And then we'll ask the budget committee if they have any questions. We'll ask that we hold a public hearing and discuss the actions on the proposed 21-23 budget. So President Bagnall, since we have all of the budget committee members here now, do you want to move back and do the election of the budget committee chair?
Okay, I don't know if Carl, this is Jim Doan. I don't know if Carl and John have joined us, but we had our own private little meeting going there. Fortunately, there was only one commissioner, so we weren't in violation of state law. But anyway, are they here now?
Yes, Commissioner Doan, I saw them join.
Yeah, it appears that Mr. Fisher and Mr. Veloretsky have joined us.
Okay, great.
So thank you, everyone. In that case, on behalf of the district, I'd like to thank all the members of the Budget Committee for your continued dedication to serving the customers of the district. And you're an essential part of the public process designed to make sure the budget reflects the values of the communities we serve. So thank you for your dedication and for your service to the public. Thank you for being here tonight. And I would like to, at this point, open nominations for the Budget Committee Chair to chair this meeting. The Budget Committee Chair can be any member of the Budget Committee and will be asked to preside over the remainder of this meeting. So do I have any nominations?
I would nominate Todd Sanders.
Thank you. Is there a second for Commissioner Sanders or any other nominations?
I second.
Go ahead.
Can I ask who oh, John Veloretsky. Thank you, sir. Any other nominations? Right. Seeing no more nominations, I will close that discussion and I will call for the vote. Will the district recorder please do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins,
Yes.
Ms. McWilliams,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Veloretsky,
Yes.
Mr. Whiteley.
Yes.
Congratulations to Commissioner Sanders. You are the newly elected Budget Committee Chair, and I will now turn the meeting over to you. And I will fervently hope, given the extreme efficiency of our district recorder, that you have a little log telling you what to do next.
I'm sure it will be here momentarily.
I just hit send.
Yeah. Going from memory, I would say that I now turn the meeting over to Paul Matthews to continue with his discussion that he just paused earlier.
Really excellent job, Commissioner Sanders. You are showing your chops as chair already.
So Chair Sanders and Budget Committee members, we will get back underway. I believe I covered the agenda, and so we'll just get right into a quick discussion, obviously, of the Oregon local budget law. We don't need to talk much about this because we've talked about it.
This is Commissioner Doan. Paul, I think out of necessity, you have to start over.
Okay, I can do that. I'll start the presentation here and just give a quick recap of our agenda. We're going to first answer some questions that we had during the workshop. Tom will give a brief overview, comments of how we got to the budget that we have. I will then present the proposed budget as well as walk through the budget message. We'll have a discussion of some of the projects were deferred with the Willamette Water Supply System. And then we will present the proposed 2021-23 biennial budget by fund. Then the Budget Committee will ask any questions they may have of staff. We'll hold a public hearing and discuss the actions for the proposed 2021-23 budget. Our hope is tonight that the Budget Committee will be able to approve a budget that we then pass on to the board for its consideration and adoption at its regular June meeting. So Oregon local budget law is what guides us here. We've talked about this during the Budget Committee workshops. We're actually in the real Budget Committee meeting where it's available for public comment. We're going to have that public hearing, and we are going to deliberate here. So you've been presented the proposed budget. We're ready for go time here as it relates to our deliberations as a Budget Committee on the proposed budget. A few things to remember. All members of the committee have equal authority. That the elected officials and the appointed Budget Committee members hold equal authority within the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee must have a majority of members present to meet, which we have that quorum, and it takes a affirmative vote of 6 members to take action. So I want to circle back on some of the questions that we had from the first workshop, for the workshops that combined, actually all 3 of them. And one of them we forgot to address, actually, and that was on me. It was a question that was raised by President Bagnall as where we stand with leak adjustments. So we'll talk about those. And we had some questions about our customer base that we serve and information on shutoffs. As it relates to the leak adjustment, the question was, what was the budget amount that we have in the 2019-21 biennium? It was $731,270. We're looking right now as if we'll end the fiscal year with a favorable variance in that account of about $30,000. So we're probably going to come in close to about $700,000 in total expense charged to the leak adjustment budget. The way that we calculate that leak adjustment, we use recent history of leaks and the size of bills that customers have. And we also factor in the change of rates, because as water rates go up, the bills go up. So it's a function of rates as well as the customers that are affected. So withdrawal of customers from Beaverton will have somewhat of a depressing effect. Increase in rates will increase the leak adjustment, but that's how we came up with the proposed budget amount for the leak adjustments. The other question that we had, we covered in the second and third workshop, which is who our largest customers are. And so I won't go through that information, but that was presented, as well as a follow-up to that, which is where do we deliver our water? So by customer class, where are the high-use customers and the low-use customers in the system? So we worked with our GIS team to produce these heat maps out of our GIS that correlate the annual water sales to customers from their meter readings and their customer count on an annual basis throughout our service area. And as you can see from this graph, it looks like everybody's a little bit below average, and that's because, frankly, our large industrial customers have a disproportionate amount of water demand, as you might imagine. So the hot spots that you see, now I don't know how to pull up this format. I don't know how to pull up my laser pointer. It disappeared on me. And even if you look at the map, you'll see areas of greater intensity, and those tend to be our large industrial customers. The bright red spot that you see on the left side on 12th Valley Highway, TV Highway, just a little south of that, that's Intel. If you go on the opposite side of the service area, up by where 217 Highway 26 come together, that red spot is St. Vincent's Hospital. So you look throughout the service area and you can see those large industrial customers, the so-called production customers that take that water. So if we isolate it and just look at the commercial and industrial customers together, you have the same effect, and really those customers dominate. You can see up in the upper left-hand corner out on Highway 26, that blue spot, that's Research Fine Foods, their production facility that they have out there. And again, you can see Intel down on TV Highway. And you can see Maxim Semiconductor, that's right there on Murray, that little appendage there. And of course, you can still see St. Vincent Hospital. But we looked at not just the commercial, but we looked at the residential customers. And we combined the single family residential and the commercial customers. what you essentially see now are the hotspots are large multifamily complexes. That's not particularly helpful, so we isolated and just looked at the single family accounts, and here you can see some greater gradation. And essentially what you're seeing is the hotspots are along quite a bit down in the South Cooper Mountain area, where we see greater, larger lot size and water use for a variety of purposes down there. And so you can then see where those hotspots are, and that displays where our residential, single-family residential customers use greater demand. And this analysis was in response to a question by one of our budget committee members, but this is something that we look at and want to use. We've been looking at it obviously as we've been dealing with collections, trying to help customers most in need. We include that in the Thursday memo, but we also want to look at tailoring our conservation and other messages around helping customers with higher demands in particular parts of our service area. And the last is looking at our irrigation customers. And what you see with irrigation customers, that's typically in commercial and large multifamily properties, as well as homeowner associations. And you can see the distribution of those throughout our service area. So essentially, those were the questions that we had as relates to the customer base and where the water is used within TVWD's service area. And I mentioned that we used our GIS-based system to correlate the demands geographically to the areas. And some of the benefits I mentioned, we want to continue down this road as we get our new CIS system, so we can correlate demands to the areas. With AMI, we'd be able to do it with increased granularity of time. Right now, we have to look at an annual basis. If we were trying to look at it on a monthly basis, what you'd essentially see is the meter reading routes turning on and off as they rotate from month to month. And that wouldn't be particularly useful to try to figure out where our customers are. So the AMI data will provide us a little bit more granularity. With that, the next question that we also talked about in the last one is, where are our customers? And this is as of March 31st, the customers that were in shutoff and their bills. And so we talked about that, and I want to spend more time on it here tonight. And then we're very appreciative. We got quite a few questions and comments out of the proposed budget, and that is particularly helpful because we're able then to provide a memo out to the budget committee that addresses those questions. And so we did go through and sent a memo out, got it out last night or yesterday afternoon, and covered this material. And it was a team effort. A lot of it was done by Carrie Pack, our chief engineer, and her team, because a lot of the questions were around the CIP, but quite a few of them were on the finance side as well. And I want to take just a moment here to see if there were any follow-up questions from this. Did we answer the question that was being asked? And are there any comments as to some of the responses that we provided, just to give the budget committee members an opportunity to have a discussion about any questions that were raised in the answers we provided. So with that, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any questions or comments from the budget committee members.
I want to just take a minute to thank the budget committee members, everybody that reviewed that big long budget in advance and submitted their questions in advance. That's really helpful to the extent you can do that. It makes a big difference, gives staff the opportunity to research the question and respond to them at this meeting. And I thank you for looking at the ones I submitted.
Yes, and by the way, in most cases where we found things we want to improve, we'll do that in the next iteration of the published document. So that may be the approved budget, or it may be in the adopted budget, depending on how things turn out.
Paul, this is Marilyn, and I just noticed something this afternoon. I apologize, this is so late. But on page 5-8, there's that graph of the typical monthly bill by fiscal year for our customers. And I was kind of disturbed because I know we talked before about this going up 9.5% for a couple of years and then kind of, smoothing it out. But with the current economic situation, do you feel like our customers can tolerate this?
Yeah, so I mean that's an excellent question, Marilyn, and we are concerned about that, obviously. And what we have found, and we found this by looking at research, not by doing original work ourselves. So I want to caveat that, is that there are a large number of customers typically that can pay these things, and then there are a small number of customers who cannot. And our approach in this budget to recognize that was to increase our appropriations for the Customer Emergency Assistance Fund. So we're going to transfer considerably more money there. And we're also going to access the federal programs that they have. They've stood up a new program called the Low Income Water Assistance Program, which is modeled after the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, the LIHEAP program. And so we're going to use basically those two programs to assist customers that are in need. And we had a conversation early on in the pandemic with our partners at Community Action to identify what was from their perspective, the best way to make sure we were helping customers. And they actually recommended that we continue with our Customer Emergency Assistance Program, but that we increase the funding amount and that we actively pursue the federal assistance. So that's our strategy. And so we don't know, but for certain, but the information we have is that for many customers, this won't be a huge imposition, but for those customers that it is, quite frankly, the rate increases aren't the problem. It's the bill right now that's the problem, and so they're going to need assistance one way or the other, and hence the increase in the funding that we talked about. I don't know if that is a satisfactory answer. The other thing we're doing, just to let you know, is we are going to engage in a rate study. So it'll be a follow-on to the work we did with Rate Advisory Committee. It's been 5 years. We want to resurrect that and work again on this issue of affordability.
Thank you. I'm sure you will also encourage people who are behind on their bills to call in to the customer service people and let them help them.
Yes, and that's really what we want to do is especially to be able to use the new federal assistance so we can get our customers engaged. And when we went through the CARES Act dollars last fall, ended at December 30th, we got about 27% of our eligible customers to participate. And of course, we want to get that number up. I think Mr. Hickman wants to add.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that this is something that is very concerning to us, and we have been actively trying to reach out to our customers who are in some type of financial constraint situation right now. It's been difficult. We've had a lot of non-response, and so we are trying to let them know that there is assistance available to them to increase that, to increase their participation in that. But ultimately, we do have a situation where people respond when there's a real threat of losing that service. And that's an unfortunate thing that's really the only tool we have to get people to engage. But that is where we are headed for. We've been spending the last month or so reaching out, trying to actively get people to reach back out to us. Our next step is to let them know that if they don't reach out, we will have to take further action. And hopefully that will actually increase participation after they see that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul, I have a question about, is the district running into any material shortages? You know, that seems to be a problem with inventories right now.
Yes.
How will how that could affect the budget, assuming there's going to be some inflationary pressures?
Yes, great question. I think I will ask Chief Engineer Pack and Water Supply Program Director Krask, I'm gonna put the two of you guys on the hot seat since you're more closely involved in those things, but could you answer John's question?
Well, I'll get started, and Dave probably has more real numbers. We are seeing some significant supply issues. Actually, more than supplies, we're actually seeing shortage with people that can do the work for the contractors. So that's been an issue as well. The price, as far as the cost of the project, you know, we have a budget that you all are going to adopt, and once as we move forward with design and construction, if we experience additional costs, we'll just have to do a little bit less. You know, the schedule for the projects will be stretched out. So, because we're not Treasury, we can't print any new money. So that's how we'll be dealing with it. But we are keeping a real close tap on how things are shaping up in terms of the cost of the equipment and materials that's happening right now. But more than the cost right now, we just can't get the stuff because there's just shortage of everything going on right now. Dave, did you want to add to that?
I don't have a lot to add to what you said there, Carrie, except just to give the program's perspective. One of the good things about doing such a massive infrastructure project that we're doing at the Willamette Water Supply Program is there's a lot of interest in it. So whereas some of the smaller CIP projects might have a harder time getting interest, we've got interest from all of the largest contractors and the suppliers that want to work on our program. So that's the good news. We are seeing anecdotal information of inflationary pressures on some of the commodities and materials that we're going to be using on the program. And some of it is, if you look at just the moment in time we are right now, it's frightening with some of the information that we're getting. And so I'm doing a lot of outreach actually to other utilities in the Western United States to find out what they're seeing with similar sized programs in terms of what sort of material costs they're seeing. And is this a bubble that we're seeing right now, or is this going to moderate? And as things kind of come out of the COVID fog and production gets back up to pace, are we going to see those come down? So we're watching it very closely. We're tracking it with our costs. We have management reserve and other tools in order to manage it. But the main thing is nothing to panic about right now. But we're doing a lot of tracking and investigation of it right now. That's as much as I'm prepared to offer you today. But be glad to speak to it more further as we go along.
There could be schedule slippage then.
No, well, I guess there's always a potential that there could be schedule slippage. I don't believe that's going to happen with us. We have very hard schedules on all of our projects. Some of our projects are also with partners such as Washington County, and there's firm agreements on all of those schedules. So I believe I believe schedule is less of a concern than cost right now.
Okay.
The smaller in-district CIPs, we are seeing schedule slippages.
Thank you.
Tom, I saw your hand go up and then down. So did you want to add or?
Well, I was just going to add to what Mr. Kraska was saying there, that we've made decisions to help mitigate the potential of some of this risk. It doesn't eliminate, but it helps potentially mitigate that. And some of those things, one was brought up a little while ago, that we're doing rate increases that are higher than what we initially had thought. But that helps our financial position to mitigate some of these risks. The other thing that we did is we've postponed, I don't want to say eliminate, we haven't eliminated, we've postponed, and you'll hear about this later tonight, 2 very large pieces of the Willamette project in order to get us through this pinch point. So that has also bought us a little bit of financial capacity between those two moves to help mitigate some of that potential risk of increasing costs due to a lack of available materials. I can say, personally, I recently went and bought a couple sheets of plywood, and it shocked me at $120 a sheet. I was shocked, and I think there are many things in the building industry we're seeing those kinds of very significant increases, and we certainly hope it will come back down as more and more supply and resources becomes available.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, John. Any other questions at this point? And later in the presentation, I have some disturbing news to talk about inflation, so we can circle back and talk about that when we get to there as well. There are no other questions. Then I'd like to turn this over to Tom Hickman to give his comments setting up the budget. Tom, are you going to take control of the presentation from your desk?
That's my favorite button, right? So,
okay.
It's not often I get to say I take control. So first off, thank you, Paul, and good evening, President Sanders and Budget Committee members. I thank you all for giving us your time here to this really important process that we have to go through. So let's jump into this. So a reminder, you've all seen this before, but TVWD is in transition right now. We went from this suburban water provider phase that we were for many years, and we were preparing for the WWSP, this very large project. We are now into the construction phase of that project, and that's significant for many reasons. We be serving customers where water's purchased under wholesale contracts. We're going to continue to manage a complex transmission and distribution system that's going to get a little more complex to manage after this project is done. And then, of course, we're managing, as you'll see later tonight, the construction of a $1.3 billion program. That's a lot of dollars by any standard, any measure. That is a lot of money for us to be managing. The point is we're not some small little water district. This is a significant change from where we've been in the past as a district. And then we're going to move to preparing for the regional operations phase, which we're already preparing for. But that's what we're going to be spending the next few years doing, is preparing for that, so that when we move to this regional operation phase, it's all done smoothly and professionally, and we uphold all of our standards and values and commitments to our customers. This was my first budget that we are wrapping up here, and I came on board on August 1st of 2019, right after this budget was adopted. I think I met most of you at that point in time briefly. And during that time, we've had some unfavorable developments. The water sales have been down the majority of that time, which in turn drives our revenues down. So that has been a serious challenge for us. On top of that, with the pandemic, SDCs have been down. And then we've seen our collections problem increase over that same time period. So bad combination of events to be taking on as the new CEO, but here we are. But we've had some favorable developments. Our operating expenses are lower. I have to say the leadership team here has responded very professionally and We responded early to some of the concerns that we saw once the pandemic started taking shape, and that has helped our position. Our partnerships are improving. Our partnerships with the city of Beaverton, with the city of Hillsborough, as well as Washington County, not that they weren't good before, but they're certainly improving. I think we're in a better path with those relationships. So that's all been going well. But as the state of the district, we've had both successes and challenges. Some of these are in both columns here. But on the success side, we've implemented the new governance for the WWSS. That got launched in 2019. And I think it is, well, these next couple of years, you're going to see that group is going to be a very busy committee. There's a lot of dollars that are going to be moving through the WWSS. We were successful in the WIFIA loan re-execution, getting a much more favorable refinance on those terms. And then we've been operating, as all of us have, under a pandemic. But again, it's been a challenge. This is not something the district management has not gone through this before. None of the staff have, as any of you. And it's really challenged how we are responding to our day-to-day activities. It's been a challenge, and we've, I think, been very successful at it. We've made progress on our DEI initiative. This was something that I believed was very important, that we address this not only internally as district staff, but we recognize the diversity of our communities and the customers we serve. We've done a number of things on that front, and as you will see in the budget, we're proposing to do more as we move forward in these next couple of years. And then we did some, before the pandemic, we got some development of the leadership team and of all staff. We did DISC training. Right as we were getting to kind of the big finish on that, the pandemic hit, and we're going to have to pick that back up. That kind of development really needs to happen in person. It's really difficult to do development virtually. You can do it, but that face-to-face has great value when you're doing that kind of team development. Of course, on the challenges side, the pandemic has clearly been a challenge and continues to be. The new challenge now is going through the transition, of back to the office. And in the last year and a half, what we have seen, and we are seeing here, there are a lot of people that are saying, hey, I can successfully demonstrate I can do my job remotely. And it has great value to people, so much so that people are making career decisions around whether entities have this as a benefit or not, if they offer this. So we've been working on that, and how we will work with our staff as we transition back to whatever our new normal is here. Of course, I mentioned the revenue shortfalls in challenges. Even though we are improving on partnerships, partnerships, they involve humans, and so they remain a challenge, but we continue to work to always improve on those, and make it so that we are working through those challenges together, rather than really going after each other in those when we reach those challenges. Implementing CIS has been difficult in part because of the pandemic. That's one reason. Another reason is we're working with a vendor who wanted to take a very aggressive schedule approach to this, and we are working with that schedule. When it's all said and done, we'll probably have some slippage on that schedule timeline. But even with that schedule slippage, it will likely be one of the most successful and fastly implemented CIS projects in the country. So we will not give up quality for speed. So we are focused on the quality side of this, and then still want to get it done quickly. And right now we are on track to get this done very, very quickly. And then, you know, as mentioned earlier, we have a lot of project risk and uncertainties. There's so many things that are outside our control right now. And one being the material costs. You know, we're seeing the cost of steel at an all-time high. Cost of concrete is at an all-time high. Well, these are all things that we rely on, right, for everything we do. So that poses some risk for us. But as the other risk that was mentioned by Chief Engineer Pack was the risk of people. Right now, you know, the labor market is finicky, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so getting staff or being able to hire contractors to do the work that we need done is becoming its own challenge right now. So those are the challenges we face, but we have a great deal of confidence we'll be able to work through those. Some of the other risks, a little bit finer tune on this. I mentioned the infrastructure risks side of this. Of course, anytime in this next biennium budget, we could have a failure of a major facility, and that could really put us in a situation where it's going to be hard to adhere to everything we've already stated. And then cost of impacts of delaying investments. So when we delay these investments, they don't get cheaper with time. You all know that. And so those are also risks where, again, we're trying to mitigate for those and plan for escalation, but it still poses a risk when we do that. And then there's the operational risks. So the big ones is the effectiveness of our operations. If we start to have challenges there in terms of staffing, it can impact our effectiveness. And then, of course, maintaining service levels is directly tied to that. And then really preparing for the WWSS, where we are actually running the entire new project. That has some very significant operational risks that we're working through now. And then we have financial planning risks. Future revenue, whether it's higher or lower, frankly, I hope higher. I prefer to have that problem and the problem we've had the last couple of years. It's a risk nonetheless. And then interest rates and cost of borrowing. We're seeing that start to come up along with inflation. We do not know if this inflation, the inflationary causes here, if that's a temporary thing that is part of the rebound from COVID, or if that will be something that's more sustained. So those are all things that are risks that we are considering as staff. I believe we have built mitigation into this budget to address those risks. So over the last budget, our desired strategic goals was that the water supply meets community needs and expectations, that the community is confident in our water service and employees, that we are good stewards of our financial resources, and that we are good stewards of the natural resources. And lastly, that we are good stewards of our own assets and resources, so the people and physical assets. So these are the strategic goals and our desired results were these. So when we look back on how did we do, well, I think we're doing pretty well. The program for management and operation of the WWSS, that is up and running. And I think we are showing and demonstrating that we are in line there with meeting the desired results. Our debt program certainly met those. And of course, some of those don't apply. And then our strategic communications program, I'm going to talk about this here more in a moment. We still have some work to do there. And that we need better information, better survey information to really help guide us in our communications program. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And then develop and implement the CIS. We certainly are in now, as I mentioned, the implementation phase. And I will tell you, it has staff scrambling. Our customer service team as a whole, they are definitely under the gun. I'm a little worried about them feeling a little bit fatigued as we move through this. And it's something we're trying to pay close attention to, that we don't overtask or over ask of our staff in the development or in the implementation side of the CIS. The district resiliency program, this is the work that we had to do to comply with I think it was the American Water Infrastructure Act, and we got that completed. And then the human capital strategy was another initiative that we had, and we were also successful there. Just to show this same information a little bit differently. So the program for the management and operation of the Willamette Water Supply Program, as you can see, we didn't mark it complete because, well, that program won't get complete until 2026, but we are on track. We are on schedule at this point, and we have some major years, these next couple of years, as you're going to see, are really significant to us, in ultimately delivering this project successfully. So Mr. Kraska has a lot on his plate, him and his team, to keep us on track there. The debt program, I would argue, and I think Paul would argue, that we are complete with that. So he has successfully not only gotten us a WIFIA loan in the last budget cycle, but we also were able to renegotiate that same loan with more favorable terms. And then I mentioned the strategic communications program. This is one that we realized we really need better information in terms of customer survey to really know how to really aim our communications program, to know that we actually have targets that are measurable, that we are achieving what our customers want. Excuse me, my lights just went out when I don't move enough. And then the district resiliency program I mentioned before, we have completed that. And I really thank our risk managers and their work on that. That was all done and completed on time. And then our HR department completed the human capital strategy, really getting a new program that we have for, it's called NeoGov, and really changes our ability for recruiting and for being able to provide good feedback to our employees. So those were the initiatives. I think we've done pretty well with the prior budget. And updating where we're headed, so we started out with conducting a SWOT analysis of all staff. This was a big effort that we took on initially shortly after I arrived, and incidentally, shortly after I arrived, this pandemic hit. And so it made the challenge of doing a normal strategic plan very, very difficult. But we compared and adopted desired results from that SWOT analysis that we did. We developed some major themes from it. And then we identified initiatives that could support those themes. And then we brought those priorities to the Board of Commissioners back in January. Had a discussion with the Board of Commissioners, and then made some modifications to the proposed initiatives. And then we are now presenting those initiatives to the entire Budget Committee here. So thank you, Chair Bagnall. I hate to get associated with the pandemic.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I mean, you said it actually more than once, so there it was.
Yeah, no, I know. It's fair enough. So major themes, though, that we came out of the SWOT analysis that we did with all the staff. One that came out was the human investment. There was a desire for more training, more team development, and really making sure all of our staff are equipped to meet a changing future that is changing rapidly. And we want to be in a better position to do that. So that's what we're talking about under human investment is a lot more training than what we had done in the past. Intergovernmental relations to help us continue to improve our relationships with the local governments. This is something that the district used to have, was a government affairs position. We decided that because of the economics, it didn't make sense right now to add a position. And that was something that we needed better refinement on describing that position and what we want from that position. So we're really utilizing a consultant at this point to help us on our government relations. In fact, not just one consultant, but we're also using a consultant to help us in trying to pursue both federal and state dollars, because you got to know how to be in the game to really be effective at that. So we're working with consultants in that. But what we'd like to transition to is define this government affairs position over the next 2 years so that we can, in a future budget, come back with a government affairs position that is dedicated to these things. Business intelligence, this is one of the things that has been very clear, and it came out loud and clear in our SWOT analysis, that we needed to really make our business decision process tied to better data and access to that data. So in a lot of cases, we have really good data, but accessing it right now is not easy. And it's very easy to end up with data that is not consistent, or some data has been cleaned up and other data hasn't been, and knowing that, which ones have and haven't been can be a challenge. So this is all part of the business intelligence side of things that we need to invest in. And then, of course, efficiency through modernization. We need to look at where everything's headed, where the industry is headed, and find strategies to lower the cost of doing the work we do. So part of this is tied to really taking our asset management program that we have and taking it really to the next level. And that's something we have focused on for this next biennial budget, along with really focusing on formal project management. Formal project management really puts us in better cost controls, in project controls. And so we have a lot of future work that is separate from the WWSP that we got to do that, frankly, Chief Engineer Pack, her team is going to be doing in the future. And now's the time to invest in us preparing for that work, and getting everybody really trained up in a common language of project management. Also, AMI is something where the industry as a whole is headed. And this is something we definitely want to move in that direction, and certainly helps us be more efficient. It also will help us make better decisions around our master planning efforts when we have a higher resolution of data. And then last but certainly not least is all the current initiatives. It's a busy time here between the WWSP and the CIS and the critical infrastructure work that Chief Engineer Pack and her team are doing. We have to continue to deliver on these. We know that. And we can't sacrifice that to achieve anything else. So that is really first and foremost, is that we successfully deliver these current long-term multi-year initiatives and investments that we're doing. So that's first and foremost on our list to achieve. Let's see here. So what I want to do now is, well, first, if there's any questions on anything I just ran through, I'm happy to answer. If not, I will happily turn this back over to Paul, our CFO, and let him continue.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Okay, so seeing none, we'll proceed down the track. And what I'm going to do here now is to present the proposed 2021-23 biennial budget, and to cover the highlights of the budget message, which was included in the document that we delivered to you last week. So the budget message is organized around some general themes. First, a little bit of talk about the budget process, the format, and the basis of the budget. These are things that are just sort of required information that we include in there. The district's strategic initiatives, which Tom just talked about that. And as we get into the budget message, we'll break down where we're going with the strategic initiatives in the coming biennium. All again based on the process that Tom described. Our financial policies and our long-term planning, the biennium budget summary, and then the 6-year CIP, both for the district improvements as well as for our joint ventures. That's kind of a roadmap of where we're going. So Oregon local budget law really drives where we are. We started out by producing the requested budgets at the department levels. The management brought that together. Then the budget officer, that would be me, pulled it together and produced a proposed budget. Now it's a little misleading to say I did that. It was really a team effort, and we were missing our former budget officer, Todd Burton, as we went through this process. So it was all of us exercising muscles that we hadn't used in the recent past. So it's been a heavy lift, and I just really appreciate all the assistance from people in our finance department that really pulled extra weight and did their day jobs as well as getting this done, as well as my colleagues in the other departments. So I'd like to thank everybody for their help in getting that proposed budget. So that's where we are now, presenting the proposed budget with a hopeful outcome tonight that the budget committee then will approve a budget to send on to the board for its adoption. So that's kind of where we are in the process. A quick recap of how we got here, and this highlights again that strategic planning process that Tom talked about. It started really, as he indicated, in the fall, where we did do our SWOT analysis. Actually, it was earlier in the fall, but started early on in the process where we did a bottom-up and a top-down SWOT analysis, and we filtered against the adopted desired results the board had. Through that process, we came up with our themes and initiatives. Then we presented that at the January 20th meeting to the Board of Commissioners, the district's initiatives, and in our financial plan, what the impacts were. On March 17th, we then presented our financial strategies to the board. And that was the basis for making sure that our proposed budget was in keeping with the board's directive on the financial strategies. The departments then produced their requested budgets, and we consolidated those. We had our first budget committee workshop on March 23rd, and that was the department overviews, where each of the department, kind of a show and tell format. We did that in lieu of having our budget committee tour. April 8th, we actually heard from our three larger, more complicated departments, the Engineering Operations Department, where they talked about their operating budget, as well as the CIP, Customer Service, where Customer Service Department talked about their operating budget, as well as the CIS project, AMI, things that they are undertaking. And then, of course, Mr. Kraska talked about the water supply program and the activities there. And then on the 22nd, the last budget committee workshop, the other departments presented their operating budgets and capital outlays. And then we talked about the joint venture funds. And that brings us then to May 19th, where the Board of Commissioners actually approved our financial plan. So we now have a formally approved financial plan that's available on the district's website. And frankly, we used it the very next day after that meeting when we had our surveillance call with Fitch, which is one of our credit rating agencies. We provided them and walked through our financial plans. So it was very helpful to have that in hand. That brings us to where we are here tonight at the Budget Committee workshop. And then, of course, the next step, final step, will be getting a budget adopted by the board prior to the July 1 deadline. So Tom mentioned the 5 themes that really drove the budget. And again, that was the result of taking the SWOT analysis and running past our desired results and identifying what really we need to accomplish. And that gave us our strategic initiatives that we are proposing for the coming biennium. And this again was presented to the board back on January 20th. So we'll go through each one of these strategic initiatives, but this lays out how they reinforce the desired results. And the desired results were actually adopted by the board back in 2012. So these are the same desired results. And we will be, as part of the mission, vision, value, revisiting the desired results to make sure that they are, in fact, what still serves the district's interest. But each one of these initiatives supports the district's desired results in one way or another. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tom to talk about the first initiative, which is the mission, vision, and values. Tom?
Thank you, Paul. So it's been a number of years since the district has revisited the mission, vision, and values of the district. And so we want to develop district-wide buy-in into our mission, vision, and values. That is first and foremost. We got to get everybody sharing what those are, and then integrate those into our culture. And so those are our major steps we really need to take so that we live and breathe what those values are every day. And then that all then feeds into our strategic planning process and guides our future strategic planning. So our guides our future budgets. The key elements here, as mentioned, is refining, updating the district's mission, vision, and values, and to integrate that into our culture through training, and then implement our DEI initiative. So that's a big piece of what our mission and vision values need to also encompass. Let's see here. I stole back control, Paul. So governmental affairs, you heard me mention this earlier. So the objective here is that we improve relationships with our other local governments in the region. And again, I want to emphasize it's not that they're bad now, but we can improve. We can do better. And so we want to spend some time focusing on that over the next couple of years. And then develop better information on how TVWD's efforts affect its partners and customers. So this is really tied to getting better survey data. So it's one thing to say we deliver high quality water and say that that's what's important to our customers. I'm sure it is. But there's probably more that our customers also have concerns about besides that. And so we want to know what those are so we can make sure we're meeting what our customers' expectations are. And then more fully integrate the communications functions. So really tying the communications functions in underneath that government affairs position. That should all be going hand in hand and working as one team. The key elements here is to develop and implement the government affairs strategy, reorganize our communications by pulling communications group in under that government affairs position, and then implement our new survey protocols to get a better handle on what our customers really expect of us directly from the customers. We want to know that. We don't want to be making assumptions on their behalf. And then the other one you heard me mention, we cannot succeed by sacrificing what our existing initiatives are. These are multi-year big initiatives. We have to develop these successfully. And so key on top of that list is the implementation, completion and implementation of both the WWSP and the implementation of the WWSS along with WIF. Those ultimately, that is top of our list in terms of priority. We must be successful. We also have to plan for a wind down of the project management office. We have staff that are currently at the project management office. We have staff that we would like to retain, and we need a plan so that we can do so successfully. That is something we are currently working on and will continue to work on, and largely involves myself, David Kraska, and Chief Engineer Pack. And then I mentioned earlier, we are in the middle right now of the implementation of the CIS. We have to continue that, and that has to be successful. There's been plenty of horror stories in the industry of agencies that have not done this well, that did not implement their CIS well, and that is not a position I want to be in or put our board in, or frankly any of our customers. This is something that's got to come off without a hitch. And then the continued investment in critical infrastructure that Chief Engineer Pack and her team are focused on. And then complete the TVW branding strategy, which is part of our communications plan. And then we also need to decommission the on-premises SharePoint. So right now we have 2 different SharePoints, and it's creating a lot of confusion. And so you have some staff using the old SharePoint. We have a new SharePoint that's more cloud-based. So you don't have data, consistently stored. So that is one of these projects that we have to complete and get done. And it's a big one because we've been storing data, on site or on premises for many years. So going back through all of that and understanding what do you keep, what don't you keep, what's relevant, what's not. That's something it takes time to do that we have to go through and clean up. With that, I am going to hand this over to our HR director, Amy Blue, so she can talk about the class comp study.
All right, thanks, Tom. Conduct a class comp study. So HR plans to engage a third party to conduct a classification and compensation study in the next biennium. The study will determine internal and external equity and identify any changes or updates to TVWD's compensation structure. And if there's any questions there, I can, otherwise I'll hand it off to Tim Boylan. I think he's in the next slide.
All right. Paul, are you moving the slides forward, or should I grab control there?
I'll take control back. Tom had it, but I'll go ahead and take control. I think it'll be easier that way.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So good evening, Budget Committee members. Tom touched on this topic in a couple different slides, but where we stand with our technology stack, we've been on a journey toward a cloud first and a commercial software preference over the last few years. And with the implementation of the customer information system, that really rounds out our portfolio of technology that is going to generate some really great data for us. And as Tom mentioned, we really struggle today to integrate data from different systems and get a holistic or actionable view of what's going on in the district. That also limits our ability to make some business decisions in a timely manner. So the objectives of really starting to wrangle our business data are to improve our ability to make business decisions, highlight where we have some data gaps or inconsistencies or lack of clean data, and then really become much more efficient in how we approach these things. In a meeting earlier today, I made a comparison to the fact that you could balance your checkbook with a check register and a stack of canceled checks and a stack of receipts. But you're with applications nowadays, you can do that much more quickly and spend your time really better understanding your finances as opposed to the administrative overhead. And that's very similar to what we're trying to accomplish here. We're going to use some technology to invest in some systems that allow us to gather our data into a central repository or data warehouse, and then start creating some dashboards and business intelligence tools that'll allow all the departments to really better understand how their area impacts other areas of the district and could benefit from some cross-functional decision making. So what's really taking that first step into the world of business intelligence and better data governance. So that's essentially where we're focused with the business decision data. And with that, I'll pass it along to Andrew Karlstrom, our customer service manager, to talk about his area.
Great, thanks, Tim. Good evening, Budget Committee. Well, modernization is a pretty large category, and it's not just technology; it's also transformation of the business, of which the CIS project is foundational. And in terms of our objectives, we're really looking at reducing the costs of either maintaining or improving the levels of services we provide to customers. We certainly want to align those efforts with activities that provide the greatest ROI, greatest return from investment. And of course, we're actively managing risks. The key elements in the modernization category, and this covers multiple departments, is developing the AMI strategy. Again, that's advanced metering infrastructure. We're developing, then implementing the project management center, and also maturing the asset management strategy. So again, these are pieces that cover multiple departments, but are essential for the transformation of TVWD as an enterprise. And with that, I'll hand it back to, I believe, Paul.
Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit on the project management center and the asset management strategy. And at the risk of kind of repeating things that people have already said, we've already have been asked the question of how are the supplies and equipment and inventory, those type of issues affecting our project development and delivery process. And the whole idea behind putting together Project Management Center is behind making sure that we manage those risks. And when you have lots of uncertainties associated with delivering your projects, you really need a standardized way of managing your projects so that you're delivering your projects in a quality that you can afford and meet the schedule and so on. So we'll be adopting the PMI, Project Management Institute's philosophy in the Project Management Center, and working with our project managers so that they can have more tools to be able to deliver their projects on time and on budget and in quality that we want. And it's also going to help us prioritize our projects. With the maturing of asset management strategy, or you not only will be working with the level of service requirements, but also kind of looking at, with all of the pipes that are essentially similar age and type and in the similar system, how do we prioritize which projects we move forward with first in terms of condition assessment and whatnot? We'll be looking to streamlining the project management in terms of reporting, project cost accounting. I think Tom's already mentioned that, and among other priorities or parameters of that nature. And we'll be working really closely with the strategic plans. That's going to provide the pillars for us to really develop some performance indicators so that we can meet the district's mission, visions, and value statements. So with that as a quick update to this, I'll hand it over to Dave Kraska, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Carrie, and thanks, Paul, for maintaining control. And this is my one boring slide to share with you tonight. So let me just go through the slide and I'll explain the backstory. So as Tom and Paul alluded to, I was going to mention or explain some changes that we made to WWSS for baseline 6.1. First, the top there's some jargon there, so let me explain. WWSS is Willamette Water Supply System. So that's the acronym for our overall. I'm sorry, Bernice, but yeah, boring presentation tonight. Unless you really want to drag this out, then I can bring out all kinds of photos of our construction that's going on. But so anyways, so changes made to WWSS, that's the Willamette Water Supply System. And for baseline 6.1, what we mean by baseline 6.1, this is our 6th baseline on the program. It's an annual process we go through on the program to validate, are we on track on our budget, and are we on track on our schedule? And so that's our baseline that we update each year. So baseline 6.1 is the approved baseline for the upcoming fiscal year. And it looks like Paul's got a cool video of some of our activities that he'll show at the very end. So a reward for all of us making it through this presentation. So what are the changes that we've made? There are 4 listed here. The first one is deferred construction of one of the 2 planned 15 million gallon reservoirs. The second is deferred construction of PLW 2.0. That's our PLW 2.0 is our pipeline segment that goes, it's in Cornelius Pass Road, goes from Francis north up to Highway 26. So we're deferring most of that except for the part that's in OWNP, that's the Oranka Woods Nature Park, and adjacent to the old ODOT rail berm property. That's a mouthful. And so those 2 parcels, the Oranka Woods Nature Park and the ODOT rail berm property, they're adjacent to each other. And it's a complex and challenging area to get work done. We have a lot of agreements in place. We want to get that done and out of the way. But the bulk of this project we're going to defer. We're also deferring installation and commissioning of fiber cable in the finished water system and installing conduit. And we're also deferring installing conduit for constructed pipelines, the pipelines that are already in the ground. And we've changed water treatment plant bid deduct items to bid additive items. And again, what that means is that there were some smaller elements of the water treatment plant project that we were going to have as optional, and we could deduct them if we chose to do so. Right now, in order to control costs, we're just going to assume they're not included in the base bid. If our financial position changes, we can add them back. So a lot of complexity in this very boring slide. What happened here is the economic challenge over the past year from the pandemic hit. And we also realized some cost increases on the program. And so essentially we were challenged to fix that and to look at ways to address that situation. The other thing on the program is that we are almost complete with all of our design activity. At this time next year, we will only be in construction. So this year is really our last opportunity to make any changes. So we looked real hard and we came up with a whole suite of options ranging from about a $30 million cut to a $170 million cut on the program. And a lot of different ideas on how to go about reducing costs and controlling costs and manage risk, as both Tom and Paul have explained here tonight. And what we landed on was this roughly about $50 million cut here, as stated here. The reason that we landed on this is because by making these cuts, we do manage the risk, we do defer and control some of our costs, but most importantly is we don't miss any of our primary objectives. We still finish and we're still able to deliver water to all of the main connections by 2026. And that's really the main objective, as well as producing a first-class facility that is seismically resilient and that is a high degree of public health protection with a state-of-the-art water treatment plant treating water from the Willamette River. So we were able to find a way to cut $50 million out of the program, but still maintain our ability to meet all of those objectives. So that was a lot of words for this boring slide. I'll pause for a second to see if anybody's got any questions about any of that. Looks like that was a long enough awkward pause. I don't see anybody opening their mics, so I will turn it back to Paul.
Thank you, Dave. So one of the questions that came up as we were looking at deferring projects within the WWSS is what impact that would have on our WIFIA loan. And the issue there really is we've entered into a contract with the EPA to reach substantial completion of the WIFIA project by July 1, 2026. And they give you a 2-year leeway to hit your date of substantial completion, or else you get into what is called development default. We don't want to be in that because that can cause the WIFIA loan to be withdrawn. So we wanted to get with the WIFIA team early on to make sure that we weren't doing anything that would put us into development default and that delaying these projects would not put us there. So we worked very closely with our friends at the EPA, and when I say friends, I'm actually serious. These people are very helpful and have really helped us accomplish a lot. And one of the questions that we put to them after explaining our situation is, would these changes change the project in such a way that it would be that we would be in development default? And the EPA sent us a nice email that we wanted to have in writing that essentially says that these changes are consistent with the loan agreement between the EPA and TVWD and also the City of Hillsborough, and constitute a logical evolution of a complicated project typical of what we see in big infrastructure undertaking. And then the real important line here is the proposed baseline budget does not change the definition of the project as presented in the loan agreement. So this is essentially the document that says we're okay, we can make these deferrals, and we won't be in development default. And so we were very happy. We did a happy dance when we got this email, and I think I've saved probably about 400 or 500 copies of it someplace, just to make sure I don't lose it. So the EPA is fine with this, or WIFIA is fine with this, and Dave's team was able to put together a plan that we can execute. So good news there. I'm going to transition now away from those issues and start talking about the budget that we have proposed. And I'm going to start with staffing. And this budget, we do have 2 new staff requests in the budget. And they're both in the engineering operations department. One is for a SCADA staff member, and the other is for a waterworks operator. And those are, again, the 2 positions that we've added to the proposed budget from our current budget. Now, we have reduced staff in other departments. Within the water supply program, we've actually reduced 3 staff members. So overall, the district will not be adding net positive number of staff members, but we do have 2 in the engineering operations department. The other, coming back to the budget message, one of the important things that we have in there, and it's to demonstrate to the public as well as to GFOA, quite frankly, that we do have a financial planning, financial policies and long-term financial plan. And we've talked about this before, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we do have our financial management policies, our investment policies, which the board has approved or adopted. We have our long-term planning, which includes the financial strategies I talked about before, as well as the financial plan that was approved by the board at its May meeting. And of course, we deliver both on the financial performance, which then is subject to an audit, as well as the operational performance and the infrastructure investment. So that's an important part of where we are within the budget message. We do have our financial policies and long-term plans in place. Now I'm going to talk about the proposed budget by fund, and this is where things get less than exciting. So I'll try to go through this pretty quickly, but before we get into it too far, our process here so far has been to present to the budget committee information in the budget workshops, where there can be a little bit more back and forth and a little more formality there. But there have been some changes that have occurred since then. I want to highlight those. None of them really affect the budget in a material way, but the first one is the presentation of the purchase water. That changed a little bit in how we did it to make it consistent between some tables. The other that you will see if you look at the document is the board in April and then again in May amended the district's 2019-21 biennial budget. So as we prepared the proposed budget, we couldn't present something as amended because it actually occurred at the board's May meeting last Wednesday. So the budget that you have, when you look at the column that says 2019-21 adopted amended budget, they're going to be slightly different as we go through the approved and the adopted phase because of that change. Now the change is minor. It's a technical adjustment for the Willamette Intake Facilities Fund. We use some general operating contingency to fulfill our requirements as the managing agency. So it's not a material item, but nevertheless, it will change some numbers that you might see. The other thing is I mentioned that the finance department planned to maintain our vacancy. We have a vacancy within the department, and I was trying to hold out as long as I possibly could on that. We've had some additional retirements, and we've had some other changes within the department, and I feel that that's just presenting too much risk. So we're moving to fill that position sooner rather than later. So that's different from what I said to you earlier, and I just wanted to clear that up. It will not have an impact on the personnel services budget, though, because frankly, we included that vacant position in the personnel services budget as we would any budgeted position, but the plan to keep it vacant has changed. And then I want to talk a little bit about the risks that we've identified since the workshop 3. And many of you may have heard in the news, and in fact, it was a discussion earlier this evening about the consumer price index. It took a rather sizable jump in April. And the personnel services budget is extremely sensitive to the CPI that is reported in May. And it's how our pay for performance system formula works. Don't want to get into too many details, but the fact is that we'll know on June 10th what that answer is. So given that risk, we may find that we'll have to hold some vacancies open in the coming years, and or we may actually go to the board for action on using some of the contingency if the personnel services budget is tight as a result of the changes in the CPI. So those are changes that I've identified. Now in the CPI, we talked earlier about the impact on other aspects of the district's budget. And again, it'll take a period of time to know, is this just the waking up pains from moving out of the COVID slowdown, or is this really driven by monetary policy? And so it's just too early to tell what the long-term impacts are on that. So moving on to, well, let me pause just for a minute, actually. Any questions about changes since workshop 3? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the CIP and where we stand. And this graphic presents the district's, what we call the in-district CIP. and the spending on that. Now, the big spend that you see there, the big gray bar in the middle, that is for pipelines, which principally think right now Metzger Pipeline East. That is the pipeline that's going to connect to the WWSS system and deliver water all the way through our Metzger system and come up and join the what's described as the Wolf Creek system by hitting the old Washington County supply line. And that provides a complete loop of the district system. So that's a big spend. That project is being performed by the Willamette Water Supply Program on behalf of the district, but it is a district specific project in the district's spend. This information again was in the information we presented in the workshops as well as in the proposed budget. That's a breakdown of our in-district CIP. If we look at the joint ventures and the CIP that we have there, this presents the spending for the WIF, which is the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission, the Willamette Water Supply System Commission, and the Joint Water Commission. And if anybody can see anything other than blue lines, I really applaud your vision. Basically, the big expenditures over the next coming years is really in the Willamette Water Supply System. Those are look at the next 3 years. It's Dave and his team building quite a bit of infrastructure here in the local area. That's driving our budget as well. If we combine then the total 6-year CIP, you can see we are definitely in an investment cycle. That the next 3 years in particular are going to be heavy years for the district, and we're going to be spending money on capital projects in a way that we haven't before in our history. The good news is that we have stood up a program with accountability. The Willamette Water Supply program has had a number of years to get that in place. We've hired professionals that can manage that and make sure that everything is accounted for, and we're in good shape. But you can see this is really, we've been preparing for years for this, and we are now actually getting in the middle of it. So TVWD's fund structure, we have 9 funds. We have the funds that 6 of them that are directly support the water utility itself, and then we have 3 that are the joint ventures funds that we use for managing our partnerships. The budget itself needs to establish the appropriations for all of these funds, and so we'll walk through them in a stepwise progression. But presented here are the relative funding, the dollars that you see in the funds, and the specific details here aren't quite as important. But I do want to point out that there is a fair amount of what we would call double counting. And it's just the way the budget process works. We need to have money that comes into the general fund, comes in as water rate revenue. We transfer that money to the capital reserve fund. Well, that's an appropriation of a transfer, interfund transfer to the capital reserve fund. And then we transfer that money from the capital reserve fund into the capital improvement fund to pay for improvements. And some of that money ends up going to the Willamette Water Supply System Fund to pay for the improvements they're building on our behalf, our joint investment in the joint venture. So when we look at this money, it passes through the various funds, and in some cases it is counted multiple times. But nevertheless, it's a sizable budget. When we get to the end, I'll show you some really interesting numbers that sum it all up. But for the general fund, which is our primary fund, this is where we have all of our personnel services, our budget in the general fund. In fact, in the general fund, so for example, the water supply program, Dave Kraska's entire team, they're budgeted in the general fund, and we charge that program for the services that his team provides. And we're reimbursed from our partners as well as from our own capital projects for that service. The same with the people within Carrie's department. A lot of those get charged back, and that's how we account for those funds. So the general fund has all the personnel services within the district. When we look at the material and services budget, about 51.5%, which where I come from, that's about half of the material and services budget is for purchased water and power. So that's still an important part of the district's operating budget and the material and services budget. We will have available resources to transfer to the capital reserve fund. so we can fund the capital projects that we have. And the special payment appropriations are for the right-of-way fees that we pass through to the cities. Prior year, you see in the 1921 budget, we had 21 million for special payments, dropping down to 1.6 million. The big difference there is we funded our per site account, which is considered a special payment in the 2019-21 budget that was appropriated in the current biennium. So first of all, any questions on the general fund? Okay, move over to the capital improvement fund, and this is a pretty straightforward fund. Essentially, the capital improvement fund is used to fund capital outlays. And when we talk about capital outlays, that includes all the projects that Carrie's team is going to be constructing, the MPE pipeline that the PMO is, that the Willamette Water Supply System, or Willamette Water Supply Program is building on behalf of the district, as well as the district's investment in the joint ventures. So that is treated as a capital outlay within the capital improvements fund itself. So the appropriation was about $180 million in the current biennium, jumping to about $380 million is proposed for the next biennium. That's a $200 million increase, or about 111%, about 45% on an annualized basis. So big increases in the capital improvements, and that's as to be expected as we build out this major infrastructure. So the resources, about 376 million will be coming from TVWD. Other partners, about 3.3 million is the estimate. That is actually an estimate for the cost share with Clean Water Services for our CIS project. So they'll be contributing about half of that project cost. And then, of course, the capital outlays of 379 million, and that fund will then be in balance, where the sources and uses will match. The capital reserve fund, the purpose of the capital reserve fund is to transfer money to the capital improvements fund to pay for capital improvements, as well as to pay for the investments in the joint ventures. 179 million this year, 376 million the coming year, $196 million change. So when we look at that, we've got beginning fund balance of about 56.5 million is what we're estimating we'll begin the year with. We'll have interest income within that fund of about 431,000. Contributions primarily from system development charges, but also when people pay for meters and services, that is considered a contribution to this fund, and it's also considered a capital outlay within that fund, is about $10.7 million, and then the interfund transfer of 309 million for a total of $377 million of resources within the capital reserve fund. Uses or the requirements, interfund transfers 376 million, and then we're estimating that we'll have an unappropriated fund balance of just under $1 million. Debt proceeds fund, in the current budget, we have 25 million. We will not be accessing this. This was a question that we got from the proposed budget. It was budgeted in 2019-21, but this is a draw on our WIFIA loan. We aren't going to take that draw this year. We don't need the money, and it's in the district's economic interest just to let that money sit at the EPA. The interest that we'd be paying would be more than the interest we could earn, so we're going to avoid what we would call negative arbitrage and simply put that off into the future. We have capacity right now. We could draw up to $50 million, which is limited by our WIFIA draw schedule that we have in the WIFIA loan of $50 million. We have capacity at the EPA of approved projects, approved project expenditures of about $60 million. So once we get past October 1st, we could take up to that 60 million, which would be obviously higher by that point in time. In any event, during the coming year, we propose to draw on that WIFIA loan, coming biennium rather. So we'll have a total of 201,000 increase in the appropriations, but the 226,500 will be the estimated amount that we will estimate that we draw on that WIFIA loan. So within our debt proceeds fund, 226,500 will be bond proceeds. And we will use that for interfund transfer to reimburse the district for expenditures within the capital improvement fund. So it'll be reimbursement. It'll be transferred to the capital reserve fund to supplement that and replace that money. The Customer Emergency Assistance Fund, this is the fund that's used to fund the Customer Emergency Assistance Program. Sources of money within this fund are donations as well as appropriated funds. The current biennium, we had about $41,000 budget as material and services, and that's the appropriations category that's used to fund customer assistance. It actually is accounted for as a material and services budget within that fund. We plan to increase that appropriation, the proposed budget, to $531,000. That's a change of about $500,000 of appropriation. So if we look at the sources and uses, we're estimating a beginning fund balance of about $5,000. Donations and interest earnings. The interest earnings on the fund stays within the fund. That's because we receive donations from commissioners, customers, employees for the dedicated purpose of helping customers. So interest earnings stay with the funds that were donated for that purpose. About $26,000, and then the transfer in, the appropriations that we have of $250,000 a year, or $500,000 over the biennium, and that will allow us then to fund the $531,000 of assistance. The Willamette Water Supply Fund, this is the big one here that we're looking at. This includes appropriations for all the capital projects within the Willamette Water Supply Fund, including those that are assisting our partners. So in the current biennium, we had $1.7 million appropriated for material and services, and that's for the operating expenses associated with the WWSS, and then $217 million for the capital outlay. The proposed budget, $2.3 million for the M&S and $452 million for the capital outlay. So you can see that's a huge increase. And the way that lays out between TVWD and the partners, TVWD will be contributing. Yes, Commissioner Doan?
Is this the TVWD portion, or is this TVWD and partners?
It's TVWD and partners. It's the full meal deal here. Yes.
Thank you.
Good. So TVWD share will be $243 million, and then the partners will contribute about $212 million. And you can see the requirements laid out there. So this fund will be in balance with the proposed budget. And then the Willamette Intake Facilities Fund. The budget was, as I mentioned, just amended on last week by action of the board. So this the 2019-21 budget amount includes that change. And we see that actually there will be somewhat of a reduction in the capital outlay as that project starts to wind down. And here we see the sources and uses. TVWD has less than half in this because there are, rather than just the 3 partners like in the WWSS, there are a total of 6 partners in this. So TVWD's contribution will be about $3.5 million, partners 4.2 million, and the total breakout of the requirements, again, $7.7 million in total, and the fund will be in balance. And then the last fund that I want to talk about is the Willamette River Water Coalition Fund. This is a joint venture of the WRWC. All the expenses within the WRWC are materials and services. There are no capital outlays. We see somewhat of a reduction in the spending. This is based on the annual work plan and budget that they put together, as well as our estimate of what it will be for the second year of the biennium. So TVWD share will be about $60,000. The other partners about $68,000 for a total of $125,000 of resources, and the appropriations will be $114,000 for material and services, and we actually have a small amount, $11,000 for a contingency for that fund. And here's the summary of bringing it all together, and this is the number. These are This is a small font, but let me tell you, there are big numbers here. And let me just kind of highlight a couple of things that grabbed my attention. And that is, if you look at the column 2021 Biennial Budget, and you look down at the total appropriations, you'll see $1.64 billion. And that's quite a bit of money. If you look up just the row above that, you'll see the amount that is that interfund transfer. And again, the interfund transfer is some of that double counting, if you will, of $686,000. But total actual spend, if you add it all up, we're managing a spend of almost $1 billion. And Dave's team's doing that, our team's doing that, managing all the finances around it's a big task. We've been looking when this day was coming, and I'm telling you, this is the biennium where we're really stepping up and delivering on that long-term vision of building the Willamette water supply system. So $1 billion budget seems like a lot to me, and it really is an important milestone for the district that we are in fact prepared to manage this budget and deliver on the capital. So I just want to just close real quickly here with a summary that, as Tom indicated, we do have an unfamiliar financial position, but we do continue to have large infrastructure investment. And right now, TVWD is prepared for that large infrastructure investment. And we've been optimizing and building the team to do that now for a number of years. So it's kind of exciting. For the proposed 21-23 budget, this budget funds the initiatives based on the strategic plan that we talked about, went through the SWOT analysis, desired results, compared it, found the major themes, and then we build initiatives around that. This budget funds those strategic initiatives. It maintains current service levels with the limit of additions for those strategic initiatives that we talked about. It recognized the impact that the pandemic has had on our customers by funding the bad debt expense and the customer emergency assistance program. So we've taken that into account as we've prepared this budget. It funds the district's infrastructure investment, and it funds TVWD's transition to be the managing agency for the Willamette Water Supply and the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission. So I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions about the budget message or about the proposed budget or the appropriations by fund.
I guess if you will indulge me for a minute, this is Bernice. I just was having a flashback to when we first started the Willamette Water Supply Program. I remember looking at Greg DiLoretto, big eyes, and saying, this is going to totally swamp our whole budget. It's going to be everything. It's going to be the biggest thing we do. And he's like, yes, you need to get used to that idea. And so I have.
Yeah, and as we've been planning for this, and we do nothing but forecast. We forecast, spend a lot of time looking at that, and we knew this day was coming. We've been preparing for it, and now it's here. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom for his. I'm sorry, I forgot to advance the slide, didn't I? This was the slide that I meant to advance and talk about where we are in the summary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Paul. You made me nervous there for a minute. I was like, wait a minute, you did that one. So
sorry about that.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, I felt like this was a good slide to end on, that TVWD is under a major transition. As Chair Bagnall just recognized, the WWSP dwarfs our budget. It is everything, and so it's a big driver, and it's a big project that we ultimately will be successful and have to be successful on. And it will set the stage now for TVWD in the future as we move into more of a regional operations phase and a regional water provider. So with that, that is our closing. And I think, oh, I'm sorry, and our recommendation. Paul, do you want to take this over from here?
You bet. Thanks, Tom. So staff does have a recommendation as we close, and that is we do want to walk away from this meeting with an approved budget. Our recommendation is that the Budget Committee approve the TVWD 2021-23 Biennial Budget as proposed. Obviously, you can make amendments and changes and direct us otherwise, but that would be our recommendation. And also that the Budget Committee recommend the Board of Commissioners adopt the approved budget. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chair Sanders for your action.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, and thank you to the entire TVWD team. Does anyone on the Budget Committee have any questions before we go any further? Okay, not hearing any. I'm going to move to the next phase, which is to open the public hearing on the 2021 through 23 proposed budget. A list of attendees who would like to speak should be posted on the chat. And I read from our district recorder that we have no attendees from the public who wish to speak. Therefore, I think we can move on to the next step and say, if I'm correct, the public hearing is now closed. With that, does anyone on the Budget Committee have any additional comments or questions for the staff at this time? Okay. All right. In that case, then, I'd like to move to the next step and invite staff. I'll bang the gavel. Very good. Thank you, Bernice. Commissioner Bagnell. For that, the public hearing is closed. The gavel has been banged, and I invite staff to show the PowerPoint slide that lists the 2021 through 23 appropriations summary for each district fund.
Well, that is a series of slides that I went through, so I'm sorry that that's in the presentation, but I can't present it to you in this format.
Alrighty, if this is our only slide, is that correct, Paul?
I can walk through each one of the funds again, which would show the appropriations if you'd like me to. And this is a summary of all those of the appropriations. So we traditionally, it would be very small print to present something like that on one slide. It is in the budget document, though, that we delivered.
Well, let me ask the committee members, does anyone have a desire to re-review any of the budget items at this time? Otherwise, I'm going to call for a motion. Does anybody wish to see any additional points or has any additional questions about this proposed budget?
This is Jim Doan. I'm going to send some clarifying questions to Paul based on his response, but it won't interfere with my voting to approve.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Doan. Any other committee members who would like to voice any thoughts, concerns, or questions?
This is Craig Hopkins. I've appreciated the presentation this year, albeit that we've been encumbered with conditions associated with the pandemic. The presentation at all of the workshops has been good. This presentation has been good. Needless to say, it continues to be an ambitious budget with all that's going on with the Willamette River. I appreciate the attention to detail, and my hope is that the encumbrances that were identified earlier having to do with labor and materials costs do not get any worse than they already are, possibly catching the district by surprise, or at least a form of ambush somewhere along the way. But in any event, I see it as a good presentation, and as far as I'm concerned, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and it looks good to me.
All right, thank you. Then at this point, then I would. I'm sorry.
Could I say just one more thing? I just want to say that, you know, this has been pretty interesting to follow, that, and it's one of those life's little ironies that the first time ever the district has a biennial budget well over $1 billion, well over $1.5 billion. And at the same time that's happening, for the first time ever, we have a noticeable revenue shortfall. And yet, the staff has managed to navigate through all of that. And I just want to express my appreciation for all the work, especially that Mr. Kraska and Carrie Pack have done to work on managing those expenses. And of course, our CFO always, Paul. It's pretty amazing that those things are happening simultaneously, navigating a pandemic, navigating a revenue shortfall, and producing our biggest and most ambitious budget ever. So thanks and congratulations to everyone.
Okay. Well, I share Bernice's thought, and I'm just say again that from the CEO to our leadership team, all the way to the folks in the field and customer service and every other aspect, it's a world-class organization. Congratulations for breaking the $1 billion threshold. But I think if there's any group that can thrive under these challenges, the folks that we work with at TVWD are absolutely the group that I would put my trust behind. So with that, do I have a motion and a second that the budget committee, we're not done.
Oh, I just wanted to make one comment that this is Marilyn, and I believe that this is a historic moment for the Portland region, because this new water source is going to enable us to welcome industry and residents from all over the United States, and you know, it'll enable us to grow without worrying about having water. So thank you.
This is Jim Doan, and I will so move to make the proposed budget the adopted budget.
I would second that. Craig Hopkins.
So we have a motion and a second. Will the district recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bagnall.
Yes.
Commissioner Doan.
Aloud, yes.
Commissioner Duggan.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Ms. McWilliams. I think you are muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Velaradsky.
Yes.
Mr. Whiteley.
Yes.
President Sanders, you are muted.
My turn. I believe we have achieved at least 6 votes, so the motion passes and the proposed budget is approved. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Chair Sanders. And I just want to kind of highlight a couple of things now that that business is concluded, that the next step will be the Board of Commissioners meeting to consider adopting the approved budget. That'll be on Wednesday, June 16th at 6 p.m. So please, if you can join us. That would be wonderful. And let me know if you have any questions for our team. We will endeavor to answer those. And I know Commissioner Doan, you do have some questions, and we'll get those out, and we'll share that with the rest of the Budget Committee as well in the format that we did with the memorandum. And so if there are no other questions or further, I will click and start a video. But Chair Sanders, do you want me to do that now, or are you, you may want to just, adjourn the meeting and let the video play as people conclude. It's a 2 to 3 minute video.
I think that's a good idea, Paul. Let me make my closing statement. I will gavel the meeting closed, and everyone can enjoy the video while popping their favorite drink of choice for $1 billion budget. So once again, our next steps, as Paul said, will be to adopt the budget at our regular meeting on June 16th. There will be a second public hearing held at that time. The Budget Committee members are invited and welcome and encouraged to testify. The budget, as approved, will remain available for public review and be posted on the district's website. With that being said, I will now gavel the Budget Committee meeting as adjourned.